Sometimes I get so into that music, man. That's my jam. I just forget we're doing the show.
The generic StreamYard.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to PowerHouse Finch Show. We're in the house. We are, in fact, in the house.
We are. We're here.
My name's Zach Shue.
Dan Turbyville.
And here we are. We are the PowerHouse Finch Show. This
man.
episode of this show is brought to you by Memphis Fence Company, Simpalo, and the Thornton Fence Consulting Group.
Oh, you forgot. MFC Manufacturing.
MFC Manufacturing. In fact, it's
Don't leave it out. They'll get super offended.
That's right.
So I was listening to podcast.
I also listen to podcasts.
Do you? I was listening to Dan Wheeler and Nathan Downs.
I listened to the same one.
No way.
That's
Get
crazy.
out of here. Who sent it to you? How'd you hear about that? So it's crazy. Tony Thornton is going to Nathan Downs to do a consult.
Cool.
I think
I heard that.
I think maybe last week or a week or two, I was like, wait a minute, we talk a lot about Tony's events, but we never talk about the fact that he will come to you and do consults. And he also is now offering that virtually.
Hence the name Fence Consulting Group.
Right.
It's a service Tony offers.
Yeah.
And he comes and basically just tears your place apart. It's like Hell's Kitchen, but for a fence company.
Oh, that's cool.
Right?
Ooh,
I don't know exactly what he does. I've only collected descriptions from kind of people in passing. Like I heard a little bit of basically Nathan Downs' fear about Tony coming, kind of, or his anticipation, if you will.
It's scary. Like the thought of him coming and like he goes around and interviews other people, not like just sit in my office, right?
Right. Interview your team without you present.
Right. It's scary. And then he comes back and he's like, all right, let me tell you what you suck at doing, you know?
Right. That's right.
That's what I imagine. Flambe. That's what I envision happening. And so it is pretty crazy. But anyways, so yeah, you can so Nathan Downs basically went in and like he had a couple team members like in his office and management, sales and stuff like that. They decided to go their separate ways. And that whole story is on Dan Wheeler's show, the Fence Industry Podcast, if you want to check it out.
Which
and
is
listen
like
to it.
165, I think. Episode 165. I think you were 164. So it's in the 163, 64, 165 range from, I believe, recorded on April the 13th.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I went a little Rain Man on you, but so that was important to me because I was listening to it. I've met both these guys. I wouldn't say no very much, but spent a little time with each of them, and then listened to the podcast. And I wasn't really considering that this was current. The things I'm hearing about, the ins and outs of each of their businesses was currently happening.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. And then I was like, oh, this was recorded a couple days ago. So this is about to happen.
It's happening now.
And some of that, I think you sent it to me not only because obviously we podcasters like podcasts, like those guys, listen to those guys, interact with those guys, yada, yada, but also are kind of experiencing some similar ideas or take ideas from the occurrences that the experience they're having.
So what I thought was super cool about it was basically Nathan's like, there's never a right time to do it.
Sure.
So,
and it being kind of like
whatever it is,
right? A thing that you don't necessarily want to do, or
that thing that you're like, oh, I'm just waiting for the right time. And then, 6 months goes, another quarter goes, another year goes. And you're like, oh, I'm still waiting for the right time. Like that was what was cool to me is so in March, record revenue year or month, right? So like he invoiced as much more than he ever had in the month of March. And then immediately follows that up with like a whole shakeup of people in the office and everything. So that was kind of cool to me is it's just kind of like, we're doing it. There's not a right time. There's never a perfect time, but now it's good.
Right. I've had a similar experience, I guess. I don't know if it was our peak season necessarily, but we had plenty of work and I just felt the need to let a guy go and was in a position of management, foreman position, and let him go without a replacement.
Yeah, right.
A friend of mine, I told him that, and he's like, so, that means now you're the foreman.
Right. So congratulations, you have another job to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah. And guess what? It's always like very motivational when you're put in the position where you're like, oh, I need this person. Right. So as where finding somebody maybe is like down the priority list, now all of a sudden it jumps right up there.
I will say that having someone in the position, I'm less inclined to, even if they're not fulfilling their role, I'm just, it's kind of like, pushing the car analogy.
Yep.
Too busy pushing to stop and put gas in, basically, or whatever. So they're
Yeah.
in the role, they're not fulfilling it, maybe to my expectation or whatever. And but I got 60 applications saved in a folder in my email, but I'm not even looking at them.
Yep.
I'm not saying currently. That's just a
Yep.
theoretical.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understand. So anyways, it's a pretty cool story. Go check it out. I enjoyed it. Zach enjoyed it. And you might enjoy it as well.
Well, both likable guys, man.
Yeah,
And I
for
think
sure.
even that, like, there's some charisma, and I think they, get a little personal, and some of their morals or personalities coming out. That stuff's cool too.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the link to Tony's events is in the description. That is the same website you could use if you wanted to contact him, circling back to Tony Thornton. So, but yeah, no, it's cool. Check it out.
So we are here.
Yeah.
We are not live.
We are in the house as previously disclosed.
We're currently
there.
in the house. We are not live. So this is a pre-recorded episode. By the time this airs, we should be at a local restaurant called the Butcher Shop, which is exciting. For our local chapter, which I'm going to try to get this right. I think I got it. It's the Memphis Tri-State Fence Association.
That's right.
Is our local chapter of the AFA.
So I looked it up today, and that chapter covers basically the state of Tennessee, nearly the state of Arkansas, like 98% of Arkansas, and then northern Mississippi.
So I felt a little bit of internal pressure. I don't know what you want to call that. Internal monologue around. We've gone to these few Fence Associate AFA shows. We also went to the FWA show, and we came back and we, shouted great tidings of what great time and all this camaraderie and perpetuating the business and rising tides raises all the ships. And then get home and I realized we're not participating a lot on a local level.
You mean like at all?
Right. Well, and I'm just trying to give myself a bit of a break. I'm trying to let myself off the hook here, but we are not currently active. I know we had a meeting that you and I had planned to go to, and one of us got sick, and the other one got sick too, or
August or something last year.
Right. And outside of that, we haven't been participating in our local chapter. So, suit up and show up, and do what we suggest people do, and get involved on a local level, and that's the goal. So the dinner is tomorrow.
Well, actually, so the dinner is when you're listening, when this is airing.
Tonight.
So today, tomorrow, like, I don't know.
Right now.
Right.
That's odd.
It is.
So
we're at dinner right now.
And, I was really inspired by the Northeast chapter's regional trade show.
Super cool.
And I thought, what a cool thing. That's something relatively small, what I assumed to be a relatively small committee, was able to host something that was so accommodating and a cool event.
Yep.
Right.
And so I think it's 2 chapters that kind of like team up and put on the Northeast show. I believe the West Coast show is also a couple chapters that team up and do it together.
And a ton of the work. I saw a ton of one specific fence company seeming to do a bunch of the work.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw JC Fence
and what Matt
Premier. Oh yeah. Matt Cheradona.
Right. Yeah. So that was pretty cool, man, to see. And that was inspiring to me. And I hope in the future that we could have something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, wouldn't that be cool?
That would be.
Our local chapter currently does an annual golf tournament, which I think the West Coast chapter regional does something similar, but they're doing a golf tournament in tandem with the show. And I mean, how cool would it be for Memphis to have something like that?
Yeah, that would be super cool.
Our tri-state area.
Right. Yeah, so West Coast, they do a golf tournament, they do a regional trade show, they do some educational stuff, and it's kind of all lumped into one event. So
right.
But anyways, we'll in the very near future when you're listening to this, we're gonna maybe throw that out there at our local chapter and just kind of suggest it and see where it goes. Who knows? Maybe maybe something will happen.
So I know you share with me what is Dan Wheeler's podcast called?
The Fence Industry Podcast.
The Fence Industry Podcast. So aside from the Fence Industry Podcast, I know you've been listening to that.
Mm-hmm.
What else have you been listening to? Still listening to Founders?
Yeah. So
have you moved on a bit?
I've listened to Founders. There's a new one out that I haven't listened to. I listened to the Quentin Tarantino, and I think he's got a George Lucas out now that I haven't listened to.
Okay.
So I listened to the Fence Industry Podcast with Nathan Downs as a guest. And then immediately after that started listening to Joe Everest's podcast that he like reposted or whatever in February that was Nathan Downs. And it was like when Nathan announced that he was starting a podcast.
Cool. And Joe was talking about when he was on the show, kind of going back through some old content and re-airing or something like that.
So this one was aired in February again, and it was from, I don't know, a year or two ago or something like that. So
cool.
But yeah, I've been listening to it and just kind of, it's cool to see like what were the ideas at the beginning? You know, where did this start from and all of that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's good. I haven't really followed through with the Toyota way. I just got to admit, I got to a certain point and then kind of stopped. And I've been listening to basically the basic text for the Hindu religion called the Bhagavad Gita.
I read some of that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I took a world literature class back in college.
That's cool.
And we had to read several ancient texts, and that was one of them I had to read some of.
Yeah, so I'm listening to it, an audiobook that has been translated to English, obviously. And then paired with some of the native language. So
yeah. So I have a buddy that is actively learning Hebrew so that he can read the Bible in the original Hebrew.
I don't know if I'll go that far with this.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's intense, man.
Yeah. I like listening to the Bible Project.
Okay.
Don't really talk about it on here, but one of the guys on there said he doesn't have an English translation of the Bible, period. Every Bible that he owns is written in the original text.
Right.
And so that's pretty cool too.
I'm going to get kind of far out for a sec.
Okay.
So I think
buckle up. Here we go.
If you're just like really connected and in tune, then maybe you could just read a foreign language and like the Holy Spirit would translate for you.
That would be crazy. So that's like the speaking in tongues thing, kind of.
I mean, and maybe we're so, radio waves and microwaves and frequencies are kind of throwing us off the scent. But maybe that's like an innate thing that we're born with. We just have, modernized and technologized ourselves out of that ability.
So are we going down the path of like this? All right. So here's my response to that is, are you familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel?
Yeah. Yeah.
When people were dispersed and, now speak different languages and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So
I think that maybe because of the Tower of Babel, you would not understand it.
Okay. I feel that.
That's an interesting thing. So there's our first, I don't know, theology conversation. Interesting. So, all right. So we've talked about the golf tournament a little bit.
Right.
That is coming up. That is May 17th and 18th. Man, that's a month away from today. Well, yeah. Isn't that funny? So today's the 17th. This airs on the 18th. So it's a month away from today, both times.
Nice.
Friday, practice round, reception Friday night. And Saturday is the tournament, and there will be a steak dinner and award ceremony following the tournament.
This is our local chapter. Nope, this is the West Coast.
No, this is our local chapter in Tunica, Mississippi.
Okay, this is our local chapter, the Memphis Tri-State Fence Association, May 17 and 18. We'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah, so the event's host.
How many of our people do you think will be represented? It's a handful of us.
What's our people?
Memphis Fence Company.
Oh, yeah, probably just
St. Paulo, MFC, MFG, PowerHouse Fence Show.
Would it make sense if we had one representative there for each of the brands?
Sure.
So, I don't know. We haven't made it that far. It's still a month away. We normally wait till like the week before and then make those decisions.
Highly likely that I'll be there.
Yeah, me too. decent chance. So
Cool.
you
And
should come. You should come meet me or Zach or someone else from our team. Who knows? We'll see.
Cool. And we should have a link in the description here.
Yep.
You can click on to register. Has it gotten any cleaner to get to the registration form, or is it still kind of a roundabout?
No, I think it's just the link is to the registration form, I believe.
Okay, good.
And
good
I think
deal.
the registration form kind of has like information about the schedule and all of that at the top, and then boom, sponsorship stuff, and then boom, registration.
Easy peasy. Good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Cool. We will be at the West Coast show. I've mentioned the West Coast show. I got my stuff mixed up. We'll be there. We've got our booths reserved. We are 516 and 518 in Reno, Nevada.
And if you plan, I don't know if there's anyone listening who plans to be an exhibitor, you might want to
2 booths. Oh, just one now. I just heard. Just kidding.
That was it.
Yeah.
You might plan
as we
on,
speak.
Paul Mackling.
Sorry, it is. My phone's connected to the Bluetooth there. You might plan on getting there, registering your booth, reserving your booth. There's the word. Sorry, I got all flustered from that phone call there. Flustered. You might go ahead and register and get your booth and get that done, because as of a couple of days ago, there was like 7 left. I think there's 130 booths and 130 10 by 10s, and there was 7 left. So you might want to get on that.
Let's hear a moment from our sponsor, Simpalo.
Oh, we need like a commercial. We need a commercial that we play, but it's just us.
Right. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Right.
All right. Now for a moment from our sponsors. Hi, it's Zach Shue with Simpalo. Simpalo allows you to easily, seamlessly upload plans, draw lines for fence lines, and produce a material list. Poof, pow, ladies and gentlemen, just like that.
Simpalo.com if you'd like to schedule a demonstration. All right. So this is ridiculous. All right. So we had Joe Everest on. We talk about like, man, should we talk about brands and company names and all of this kind of stuff? So Dan Wheeler calls me. And I mean, he's like all pumped up, you know, he's a pretty high energy dude. He's all fired up. He's like, you absolutely need to talk about brands that you use. What kind of tools, equipments, methods, all of this stuff. There's people out there that need to know. And I was like,
right.
Okay, dude, calm
and
down.
We
like,
spend a lot of time focusing on like the office side.
Yeah.
I mean, we are all about the administrative side of this.
Yeah, right. And we never talk about that other stuff.
Right. How are you going to complete the dang job once we teach you how to bid the thing?
Right. So we'll show you how to bid it, but I don't know. You're on your own when you got to install it.
Part. We never.
Who knows? All right. So I thought this week we would just start it off and let's talk about welders.
I like this. Will be
Okay.
easy. Case open, case closed. I use Miller welders because that's the first one I used. Well,
Blue.
I like Memphis Fence uses them because they're blue.
Yeah.
But that's what I learned on in school.
Mm-hmm.
And they've basically been in every shop I've been in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I use because that's what I like.
So for me, whenever I was born, there were Miller welders here.
Right.
And some of them are still here. Right. And so every welder that I've bought since has been a Miller welder because they lasted. We can get service on them. We can get parts, They have a massive variety. In fact, we just went through the Baker's Gas website here, looking at all of the different welders, trying to find ours. And so like the engine driven welders is currently a Miller Bobcat 230 with a GFCI built in.
Nice.
And I mean, that's sufficient for basically everything that we do. Welding, 1.25 inch solid hinges onto gates and posts and things like that. And
right. Well, for installation, right? For fabrication, we use a little different thing. Still a Miller welder, but we use like a CP200, CP300, which those are old school. I don't even know if you can buy it. That's not a model anymore.
Right.
They're probably from the early 80s. So the ones we're using combined with a spool gun, or a wire feeder.
So we started the ornamental stuff in like 2000, 99, 2000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I would imagine the welders are probably from then.
You
don't think?
Nope. Not one of them for sure. Yeah. Very old.
Yeah.
And still running.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing.
Every once in a blue moon, we have to get somebody to come do something to them. But I mean, it seems like as long as you blow the dust out of it every now and then, and
So here's another maintenance tip that the most recent the repair guy told me this. He said, the dial that you run up and down to set your amperage, he said because typically we get it set, you set it at 21 or 22 or wherever, and you leave it there and it just stays there for 20 years. Cause that's like what you teach the guy under you to use it like.
Yeah.
And so you really we don't adjust it a whole lot. He said, if you will run that up, basically it's got, what are they called now?
I don't know.
Contacts, I can't remember what we call them, contacts, and those contacts make contact with a board that slide up and down. And he said, if you want to maintain your welder, run it all the way up, run it all the way down, and that's regular maintenance.
Just like cleaning it, basically.
Yep. Just cool. Moving it periodically cleans it.
Yeah, cool. I didn't ever know anything about that.
Yeah, so the Miller welders, I did have a Lincoln MiG 170. It had some cool settings. It had like a spot setting where you could set the length of time for a spot weld in the shop for, use this for fabrication. Obviously, we weren't taking that thing in the field. You could easily plug up a spool gun, but again, I think the same features are on the Miller. And we in the shop here at Memphis Fence Company, we're running a Miller 125 MIG welder that's been there since 2000.
Yeah.
So
and we have
and these things get a ton of abuse. I mean, we are constantly talking about how frequently tools are being broken and needing to be replaced, and the welders have endured a significant amount of abuse and neglect, so on, and still kept on going.
And they get ran a decent bit too.
Right.
I mean, we're not,
daily
laying down 100-foot long welds or anything, doing that kind of manufacturing. But sure. I mean, they're running all the time, building fence and gates and whatever else we can throw at them.
Right.
So
the CP200 for the power supply in the shop with a wire feeder, and then what used to be the M25 whip is changed to the MDX 250, I think is what that's called. That's the shop setup. And then on the trucks, we basically do the Bobcat 225. We have some varying sizes, but around that area.
Yeah.
That's an engine driven welder, which has a couple of 120 outlets. I think 4 different 120s. They have 15 amp breakers on them. They also have a 240 output, which could run a MIG welder if you need to carry something out into the field that's required to be MIG welded. We use it when we assemble aluminum gates in the field.
Yeah.
So we'll take our powder coat system's only 30 feet long. So if we got a 60-foot gate, obviously we can't put in there in one piece. We build it in 2 sections, take it out on the field. The generator, engine-driven welder, powers this cart MIG welder that I talked about, powered by a spool gun, which I think I called the wrong name or product name for the
Miller-Matic, I think is the spool gun.
Right. Well, and they all have little numbers. M25,
Sorry, I
got
really excited about that.
An aluminum spool gun, and then we assemble in the field. And so that's the rig basically that we need. And this is kind of this isn't an entry level setup, I wouldn't say. I mean, but it definitely gets the job done at the capacity of work that we're doing.
So the Miller Bobcat 230 right now on Baker's Gas is $6,245 for the welder.
Right.
But you could go with something a little smaller, I would say. What are they like?
The little Blue Star or whatever?
Yeah, they're like 180 amp.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or maybe smaller, 140, I think. It's kind of the one that has like the frame around it instead of all the sheet metal.
Looks like a generator, basically.
Yeah, I mean, those things work too. And one of our subcontractors runs one of them and has forever. And I mean, it works. It does the same thing. Like we can go out and weld mainly what we want to, but $5,569 for a Miller. Right. So you can spend a little bit more money and you can bump up to the 230. And I personally think it's worth spending the extra $700. Right. But anyways, so I will say if you have a 225, or if you find a used 225, be a little bit leery of the one that doesn't have a choke. Right. They went to like this electronic choke system there for a little bit, and it didn't last long. It was like the last generation of 225 has a little like car unlock remote deal.
And everybody, well, I don't know if everybody, but I would assume a lot of people know that when an engine is cold and it doesn't have a choke, it doesn't want to start.
No,
You
and
require a manual choke in order to start at least here in cold winter mornings to get the welder to start. I mean, we're just turn them over,
yeah,
which obviously is, unnecessary use on the starter and battery both.
Yep. So I personally don't really care for the one with the automatic, electric, whatever choke is in there. That's what I have. Like I have a fence truck. That's what's on my fence truck. And it doesn't matter if it's 20 degrees outside or if it's 100 degrees outside. It's a pain in the butt to start it the first time.
Right. And also I've run the Onan. They have one that has an Onan motor on it that's a little older.
Yeah.
I owned one of those. It was okay, but I think I would stick with the Kohler if you can if that's a choice you have.
Now, I will say the little button, the little start stop button is really cool.
Yeah, the automatic start stop.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're 100 feet from the truck and you're, switching over to cutting posts or whatever the next phase of the project is, you don't want to have to walk all the way to turn it off. And that's pretty cool.
And I mean, you can shut it down. Like if you're going to weld every 5 minutes or something like that, you're putting panels up. I mean, it is pretty cool to be able to shut it down in between and stuff. But the neatest thing that I did with it was I was core drilling. All right. And I had a water pump set up and, had a water tank, had a water pump and all of that. And so instead of having that water constantly run and having to like shut it off at the core drill and then kind of readjust it every time I started again, I could just hit the button and shut the welder off. And then when I moved and got to the next hole and was ready to drill again, I'd start it up. So now I got power to my core drill machine and the water pump started running and everything. That was one of the coolest things that I did with the little shut off button. But anyways, so we're going to try to start doing a little bit more talk about like equipment, tools, methods, things like that.
Which would be really awesome if people would reach out to us and ask us to talk about specific processes or certain tools and things that you want to know about to help us with the content. You know, it's easy to just know that we have a tool and not really think about it again.
Oh, we have a lot. We have one less today.
Right.
So Donnie, he was on the show. I want to tell this story. So Donnie comes to me and he's like, Dan, I need to talk to you. I need to borrow you for about 5 minutes. And I was like, oh boy. And he's like, oh, it can wait till tomorrow. Like, I know you're about to record the show. It can wait till later, wait till tomorrow. I was like, no, Donnie, you can't do that to me. You can't be like, oh, I got something that's going to make you mad, but I'm going to save it for later. So I'm like, all right, come on, come out with it. And he says, man, we can't find this Hilti epoxy gun for epoxy anchors. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know that. Like it disappeared. Some guys took it out to a job site and somewhere between there and now it has disappeared. But he definitely presented it as if it were going to be like something like we lost a truck or a welder or, something like that. And so I'm glad that we got that out of the way before the show. Thanks for keeping me in the loop, Donnie. I do appreciate that. But anyways, with this talk of trucks and equipment and all of this other thing, we plan to try to make some videos. And so we've talked a little bit about like the wire feeder and the welder that we have set up in our shop. But what we didn't say is we have this like big swing arm that has the wire feeder that hangs from it and you can like move it in and out and stuff. I know, sorry. But we'll try to make a video of that because it's a pretty cool setup. And we have a few of them hanging in the shop and we can like cover a massive area with those mobile wire feeders, tracked wire feeders, whatever you want to call them. So that'll be something good for a video. So I was kind of thinking, man, we've had some pretty good guests and shows this year.
I was just thinking about the same thing. I really was.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like, where do we go from here? And so now more than ever, listeners, we need you.
Right. That's right. We need to know what y'all want to hear, or if you know someone who would be a good guest, because our reach is limited.
Right.
And so at this point, I feel like we're pretty reliant on social media and our listeners to respond.
And people that we just happen upon, like Victoria and the federal work, just someone that I happened upon and was like, hey, I think you'd be good to come on our podcast.
Right.
So,
I'd love to have a general contractor on. We've talked about this a little bit.
I've talked to a few of them and I can't get anyone to commit. Like,
But I want them to like critique us, basically.
Oh, that's terrifying too. That's
not
more
maybe
terrifying.
not Memphis Fence as a company, but just fence
Okay.
installers in general. Like, what would, just as far as for the fence industry, I'm a general contractor, and here are do's and don'ts or things that are common that we would prefer from you, or I mean, honestly, I anticipate them to say, I don't know, we don't actually think about fence until the end of the project.
Right. Wait, fence? Oh, that's right. That
we
is a thing.
We are gonna need some fence.
Right.
You're right.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, right.
It's that quarter inch by quarter inch square on the the back of the civil drawing.
Yeah, on page number 17,000. You haven't even made it that far yet. But yeah, so I agree. It would be awesome. And remember whenever we had, I don't know, talked about the deposits and stuff like that in like that general contractor world. So when I was doing my homework and called and talked to several of them about that, every one of them, I was like, hey, would you be willing to come on the show? And you always get the same answer. Oh man, that's a great idea. I'd love to do that. Send me some information. And then you never hear anything else.
Okay. So here's my friend in sales says, you can't get an answer with, you always have to extend the ask, right? So he says, if you're going to call someone, he was coaching me when I was trying to learn to do sales with my business, because it was pretty new to me to sell and all that. So he'd say, don't just say, I'd like to talk to you at some point.
Yeah.
Because that's not an ask.
Right.
So say, would you entertain a phone call Wednesday, November the 9th at 7 a.m.?
I've actually done that with general contractors, trying to get them on the show.
Yeah, not that day, but some other day. Just send me some information.
Right. Hey, how about this date that's a month away? And they're like,
send them the thumbnail with their face that says this is the
scheduled.
Showtime.
You're gonna be there or you're not. Like,
and you'll be the one that looks bad, not me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've had the longest, like, let's get to it introduction piece ever. We did spend some time on equipment, and I think that's pretty cool. So I'd kind of like to talk about something. It's been on my mind for a while. We've talked about it some. I've talked about it to a lot of people. We talk about it internally, and now we're going to talk about it externally. But knowing your overhead, right? You hear these people say, know your numbers.
Right.
And knowing your overhead, like, that's a big deal. We need to get.
These aren't the ones that are on the back of the fortune I just got from the Chinese food restaurant last night. Not those numbers.
I don't know. Maybe
not my winning lotto numbers.
I doubt it, but wouldn't that be crazy? That would be a really weird coincidence. So that's kind of what we're going to talk to, and maybe we'll expand on that a little bit more in the future and get a little deeper in all of that. But with no further, I need to learn how to say adieu in Italian. Let's she's over there just like, no, you're never going to get it. With no further ado, let's hear an Italian challenge. The word for the week is government.
Governo. Yeah, that's fine. Good job, both of you.
I mean, if I was in Italy and I asked for the governo, would someone know what I was talking about?
Like the government? It would be weird if you asked them that, because like it's like kind of abstract term.
Right. Like,
if it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, because here it's the same.
Okay,
like, you wouldn't say, where's the government?
Yes, exactly.
Take me to your government.
Yes.
What are you, an alien?
Take me to your leader.
Right. Like, what, the government is not a thing.
I would just go around Italy saying, Donde governo?
Oh, so you're going to mix Spanish and Italian.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And they'll be like, oh, you mean the wine. Here you go. And the bathroom.
Yeah, right.
Wine, bread, bathroom, cool, we got you. Whatever.
Right. So, all right, overhead. Oh, so the government word was actually supposed to be last week, but since I was flying solo, I couldn't do it.
Now that makes sense.
So you cheated and you practiced. That's why you did it good, right?
No, I did not.
Oh, wow.
You didn't even tell me I did good.
Yeah, you did good. I told you right now.
Oh, thank you.
You're
thank you. I
welcome.
appreciate that. You made my day.
Yay.
Until next time, more words of Italian here on the PowerHouse Fin Show. All right, so we titled this episode "Building Blocks of a Bid," right? And so,
I like that. Good job.
So
crafty with the titles.
The building block is knowing your overhead.
Hey, overhead,
Oh.
head.
Yeah. You got to have
Maybe I
it.
should say over and over instead of
Maybe.
over, head.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So, like I said, I hear about this a decent bit. We talk to folks, right? Talk to people through the show, talk to people through Simpalo, do a little touch of like some consulting stuff and all of that. And this is one of the things that I've learned is if the conversation's going down that path, we're going to start off and I'm going to ask you, what's your overhead? And it's not to, bash you or anything else. It's just like, let me have an idea of where you are.
You make a good point. We talked a little bit that I was preparing a list of suppliers earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do I put the amount of money I actually paid for the material on this list of suppliers?
Yeah, right. Right.
And so anytime we talk about numbers, it's like, oh, no, you can't see my cards.
Right.
Yeah. But I think what we're finding in a lot of conversation is this kind of healthy exercise of transparency and just getting rid of the fear of other people knowing that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in order to do well, I don't know which one comes first, but in order to meet and have a fluid relationship with a consulter, they're going to want to know. They're going to need to see it
for sure.
Right. Duh.
Right.
And then also, helping each other. And then also in the bidding process, it's likely at some point you're going to have to just basically tell them what you paid and how much you're paying and all that.
I would think it's fair for me to say that if you're going to call someone and ask them to help you with anything financial, right? Whether that's, bidding a job or just like your business in general or whatever, you're going to have to be willing to share some financial information with that person in order for them to help you. Right. So, yeah, you gotta open up a little bit. Right. And so again, you hear this saying, know your numbers. And to me, there's a lot of that. Like that's a really deep thing. And so I kind of want to start at like this really high level and let's talk about how you're going to bid a job, right? And how we're going to tie overhead into this, okay? And so I think at minimum to do this, in my opinion, properly, you're going to need a P&L, at least like an annual P&L from last year. If you don't have it, don't fret. You can get it. And so you can do like a really rough kind of conceptual thing. And I hope at minimum you have like a business bank account.
Right.
And so you can go back and you're going to spend some time doing this. Right. But you can go back and you can create a really rough P&L just by looking at your bank statements.
Sure. And to make that a little easier, you can download the CSV and put it into a spreadsheet.
Yep.
And then you can compare outgoing versus incoming and get a real, base level.
Yeah. And
place to start, right? That'd be the place to start.
Your bank statement will give you some indication as to where the money went.
Right.
Normally it says who the money went to. I mean, if you're writing checks, hopefully you have a record of that. And you should be able to kind of get an idea. But you can go through that and say, okay, money in, right? Typically that's going to be a job that you invoiced. Okay. So someone is giving you money because you billed them. And then you can look at your material and labor. So the top line there, money in, is like your revenue number, right? And then your material and labor that you spent, which hopefully you can figure out what that was based on just your bank statements. So now you have a kind of cost of goods sold, right? And then from there, you have expenses. So revenue minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit, minus expenses equals net income or profit loss of your business. And that's just kind of how you could come up with one of those. There's a lot. That's a really more in-depth conversation, but be careful with like any kind of payments that you're making on notes or anything like that. Those don't really go, those are not expenses. So don't include them in there. And so that's like a whole conversation. I didn't really think that through that well when I was making this agenda.
What about these parts?
Right. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, but you can get to like a rough P&L kind of thing.
Now's where you introduce your availability to consult.
So I could help.
I'm just kidding.
I could help, but there's probably people that are better suited for that. Because it's going to take some time. And so I suggested to someone the other day that they could maybe like reach out to a local college and find someone that was kind of like in that, maybe in an accounting major or like in a business major or something like that. And if you did want me to, the offer I made to that person was, if you want me to help, like go find that person that can do it for you. And then let's sit down and let's talk about and just kind of like give them an idea of what they need to go through and look for.
Right,
Right. And
right,
then from
exactly.
there, let them run with it. All right. So I would say that's kind of like step one is to get your rough P&L stuff sorted out. And now, guess what? You have an idea of what your overhead is. And I wouldn't go through there and just put like 50% of the transactions and be like, oh, that's close enough. Right. You
Right.
want to spend enough time to make sure that it's accurate. You don't
Well,
want to just like halfway do this thing.
and there are some pretty affordable resources for categorizing your expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's a step 3 down here.
Right.
Right. So I agree wholeheartedly.
but
QuickBooks is pretty freaking cheap. It ties into your bank account. It's
even
going to
if you,
make you categorize money in and out.
right,
And like, that's the
I
best
don't,
way.
yeah, I think the online is super easy.
Yep.
Get an app and just
Mhm.
upload, and you link your bank straight to it,
Yep.
and then once you designate a type of purchase that is a specific category, then it
Mhm.
starts to automatically categorize every time you pay a subcontractor, John Freeman or whatever, and it'll put that into that category. Every time you buy steel from Local Steel or Us, then it will put that into a category, and then
Yep.
easy peas.
Yep, that's right. And you can also use your phone, right? You can create invoices from your phone. You can I've never done it, but I've seen some stuff where you can like take pictures of receipts
Yeah,
and
I've
put
done.
them in
That's what I
like
was
that.
doing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the QuickBooks Online, like fairly basic version. I mean, there's add-on stuff, right? You can get payroll, you can get inventory, like you can get a little bit more in depth with it. But if you're just starting and you have nothing, like start with the basic thing, and then you can build from there.
Right.
So step 2, right? You have an overhead, and you can start using that information to run your business. Okay.
That's right.
So you go out and you bid a job and somebody says, "Oh, is that the best you can do?" "Oh, well, let me just give you a 10% discount. How about that?" Right? Or it's a job that you really want and you just give 10% off. Well, how do you know you can do that?
Right.
I mean, if you're just I hate to, again, not trying to bash people. Please don't take offense to it if this is you, because I promise I probably don't know that it is you. Uh right? So if you're just like, oh, hey, material times 2, material times 3, material times 20, like, how do you know what you're doing?
Right.
And so anyways, so now that kind of gives you an idea of like what the job actually needs to sell for. And from there, you can figure out what you can discount that job at. And so great idea. Just kind of get you going in that direction, right? Know what you need to sell your job at. And then what about a budget? Like, are you going to try to build a budget for next year? And if you're going to try to do that, then we can now you have an overhead, right? You have an idea. It's hopefully as you went through and kind of looked at your bank statement and all that, you like somewhat categorized it a little bit. And so you have an idea of like what you spent on marketing, what you spent on repairing trucks or equipment, and maybe try to come up with like 5, 10 categories, something like that, and just try to start putting it in there. Um, an idea for that would be to look at whatever tax form you're going to fill out. Right. And if you're going to go back through it or you're going to start categorizing things moving forward, you might want to look at your tax form and kind of just go ahead and start breaking stuff down in a way that kind of like ties into your tax form. Right. All right. So at this point, you've gone to YouTube, you've read online, you've reached out to Tony Thornton, Robert Whitaker, myself. Like I can help in some capacity too if you need that, and you found some information somewhere. I think Sean King, I believe, does like a decent bit of work in like trying to push people towards having all of this as well. So, I mean, there's people out there that could help you kind of get going in the right direction. And so you've done all of that, right? You kind of have an idea. You've got a little bit of an education in the accounting world and kind of like in your financial world. So now go get an accounting software. All right. And QuickBooks Online, we've already talked about that a little bit. It's great. It ties directly into your bank account. Yes, you do have to give them, the login credentials to your bank and all of that and link it together. But I mean, after all, it is Intuit, it's QuickBooks. Like they're probably pretty trustworthy. And so once you get that done, you can now start building that similar setup inside of QuickBooks. Again, if you have help through, someone from a local school, someone part time, someone that's in like this coaching consulting world, something like that, they might be able to help you kind of get set up with what type of accounts you need and all of that. I don't know on QuickBooks Online. I know with the QuickBooks Desktop that we use, you can, when you're setting up an account, you actually link it to one of the expense accounts or the expense categories that are on the tax forms. And so it kind of makes it a little bit easier when you go to file your taxes too. All right. So we have an idea of what our sales, cost of goods sold, expenses, and actual profit are. We have learned how to bid a job now because we know what our overhead is. And now we even have talked about an accounting software and we're taking steps in that direction, right? And so once you get this accounting software running, guess what? You have constant access to P&Ls. As long as you're keeping everything current in there, you have constant access. And so you can go look and see, how did your business do last year? How did it do last quarter? How did it do last month? How did it do last week? All right. So you can look at all that stuff, but just keep in mind when you're like really getting down to a week, timing is a big thing. So if you didn't invoice any jobs last week because they weren't done, but you paid for some material, well, then obviously last week is going to look pretty junky, right? And that can happen at the end of our, if you're looking at a week, quarter, month, any of that kind of stuff, just keep that in mind. There is that whole timing thing that happens. You get to the end of the year and you may or may not do work in progress kind of stuff to kind of like sure up the end of the year, but that's maybe getting a little bit more advanced in the accounting world, but that you can look it up, right? You can do some research. Work in progress will kind of give you like a snapshot of how your financial stuff looks at the end of the year on 12/31. That's what work in progress does. So anyways, like I said, you can see it all the time. You can do previous year comparisons. You've got a budget that's built. You can now compare, how are we doing year to date versus what I had budgeted? And I mean, it really opens the opportunity to see how your business is actually doing, all of your financials and everything else. Now, I will let you know that I bought Memphis Fence Company a little bit over 11 years ago, and we have changed many times the way that we do accounting. We've added accounts, we've changed how we do invoices, we've changed that whole process, estimate, sales order, invoice. We've changed our accounting system, or not the software that we're using, we've used since the beginning, but we've changed expense accounts, we've changed all of this stuff. So you don't necessarily have to figure it out on day one, right? But to be taking steps in the direction of figuring it out is what I would like to encourage people to do. At least start making progress. Start heading in the direction where you have what you need. And you can get deeper and deeper and more specific into that thing. We have our setup where I can look at our fleet of trucks and I can see all of the expenses for every truck, not fuel, but specifically like repairs, right? Because at some point we're spending more money on repairs than we would be on a new truck. And so we have it broken down with all of our trucks and all of our equipment, and we can see repairs that go on with all of them and kind of get an idea of how much downtime you had for one. So you can really get deep into that thing if you want, but just figuring out the information you want to get out of it, and then figuring out what you need to do to get to that information. That's kind of the challenge, right? And once you do that, you just start tracking your expenses a different way, and it's good. And then we've talked a lot about cash flow and that whole thing. Sorry. So now when you go to your banker, I mean, versus walking in there and having bank statements and you're like, I don't know, this is where my money was when I started, this is where it ended. That's your cash flow, right? That's not your profitability. uh Now you can walk in there and you can say, here's my profit and loss statement for last year, here's my balance sheet from 12/31, here's what we're doing so far, here's my budget, here's how it compares. Like, you have actual data to take to a bank in order to try to secure that loan or that line of credit or whatever it is that you want. So all of it is just kind of stepping in the right direction and heading where you want to head. um Started off that, again, title of the show is the building blocks of a bid. I know I'm really kind of like stuck on this one thing, but hey, I think it's important. So now you can go again. Like I said, we've changed it time and time again over the course of the last 11 years since I bought Memphis Fence. Now, let me back up a little bit further, and I'm just going to kind of open this up and put this out there. When I bought Memphis Fence Company, if you wanted to know the current balance in the account, you went up to the front office here where the lady was that did the deposits and wrote the checks, and there was a notepad laying on her desk. And that notepad had a deposit from 4/17, and then it would have a check run from 4/16, and that was it. And like, that was where the money in and out of the account was tracked. And then they would get to the end of the year and they would have these people come in from a local CPA firm. And I mean, they would sit down and go through financials for like, from my memory, like a couple of weeks. Right. And sometimes here, sometimes offsite, they would take stuff with them. But I mean, they would just have to like sit down and try to recreate all of this stuff. And in my opinion, they're good. They're smart. They know what they're doing. But can they really get as accurate as they would if you just put it in at the beginning? Probably not. So again, you're doing a better job than what you could be doing it with that method. We didn't have anything when I bought this fence company, and we have come a long way since then. So now we have a set of books for all of these things that we talk about that sponsor our show, and we have everything classed. So like within Memphis Fence Company, we probably have like, I don't know, 6 or 7 different classes, and so we can actually track all of the things: revenue, cost of goods sold, expenses, all of that per class. And now it really opens up a little bit more of a window into your business, because now you can see like, well, how much money do I make doing this versus how much money do I make doing that? And you might do like we did a couple years ago and make the choice to just cut out a division of it because it's a lot of energy and it doesn't have a big return. So those are the decisions that you can't make if you don't know your numbers, right? I don't think you can bid a job accurately. I think you're going to have a really hard time doing that if you don't have a decent grip on your numbers. I don't think going into the banker's office is going to go nearly as well if you don't have proper data to give them. I don't think you can make the kind of decisions about what type of jobs or what type of work do we need to be focused on if you don't have that information available to you. And it's a big deal. So then from there, you've got your QuickBooks set up. Now you can go to the next step, right? To me, this is step 4, which is going to start doing job costing. So you can now put all of your material and your labor directly to a job. We don't try to put expenses directly to a job. That's really difficult to do. As like a general rule of thumb, okay? Sometimes there are specific expenses that can be allocated to a job if if you're going in renting, if you're staying in a hotel. How about we just do it like that? If you're staying in a hotel, then obviously the expenses you spend on the hotel, the travel expense, the fuel, the food, all of that for that job is an expense that's directly allocated to that job, right? But your general overhead, you're not going to try to break it down and put little pieces of it to every job and stuff like that. So what I mean when I say tracking jobs is really focus on like the revenue and the cost of goods sold. And you know what your gross profit needs to be because by now you've built a budget. By now you know what your overhead is. And so your gross profit minus your overhead equals your net income or your actual profit. So you can get a pretty good idea, right? And now that can take that whole like breakdown a step further, even. And you can look at like different styles of fence or different areas of town that you're working in, or however you want to like dig into that data. And you can see how profitable every single little thing is that you're doing. So, not just like a class, right? So, we might have a class that's wood fence, let's just say. And so we can look at wood fence as a whole, but once we do the job costing, now we can look at privacy fence. We can look at privacy fence on a job that is between 0 and 50 feet, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, like however you want to break that down. You can really dig into that and get deep in it. And then you can look at like ranch style fence or split rail, and like you can even break down your wood stuff even further because you're doing job costing and you can look at each job. I know this is a lot of information. Yeah. There's
Oops.
I know this is a lot of information and maybe it's a little bit dry and it's not super exciting and all of that, but I do think it's important. And so I wanted to go ahead and kind of just like throw this out there to everybody and say, hey, it's it's a good idea. And if we revert all the way back to the beginning of the show, we talked about Nathan Downs and we talked about this right time concept. So there's never really a right time to make any of these moves, to take any of these steps. Maybe you've made it to step 2, right? Maybe you have your overhead, you have a P&L and you're using that information to bid. So maybe it's time to go to step 3 and get some accounting software. Maybe it's time to go to step 4 and start job costing so you can look at your financial stuff from every job. It's there's never the right time to do it, or it's always the right time to do it, maybe. But I mean, it's a little bit of it. I won't say a little bit. It's a decent bit of work to get it set up and to get everything going and to get started with it. But once you get it going and once you have a system down, it's not that hard to keep up with it. And it's like we've talked about the QuickBooks Online deal, it helps a lot because it'll start like recognizing transactions and it'll suggest where they go. Or you can set it to just every time there's a charge from, I think Zach called it local steel or whatever. Every time there's a charge from that, put it here. Right. And every time there's a charge from the utility company, put it here. And so that's going to really help that process a little bit and help to automate it and to kind of streamline that as you're going. And I think that's about all that I have. Unfortunately, Zach had something come up and he had to leave. And so I don't, Ilaria, you have anything? Are you taking a nap? Did I put you
For
to sleep
sure.
over there?
No.
It was, I feel like it was, I personally don't know how much I would have enjoyed listening to it because it wasn't a super exciting topic. But like I said, I do think it was important and I think it was good information to have. So,
I think it was great. I like to hear about financial stuff. Like
do
so
you?
when you yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I like it. I have no background in accounting or in any kind of finance or anything. And I mean, I've just picked up little bits and pieces along the way and I've read some stuff online and I've watched YouTube videos and I've
YouTube
talked to,
University.
yeah, there you go, YouTube University. And I mean, I've talked to people like in the accounting world for years now and just little stuff that I've picked up here and there and I've like applied that. But then also, we talked about how the trucks are all broken down and all of them have like a sub expense account.
Hmm.
And so with that, it's just like the information that I wanted. Right. And so at some point I decided, wait a minute, I want this information out of our accounting system. So here's what we need to put into it to get there. And so you can just kind of figure out all that stuff along the way and it gets easier and easier and your information gets better. So anyways, that's what I have. So if if you haven't started anything, it's a great time to start. If you've made it halfway through, it's a great time to finish. And with that, I think we will finish. So thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, if you want a certain topic or anything else, let us know. I do have one more thing I want to say before I close here. And so I was on Dan Wheeler's show a couple weeks ago, and the whole thing was like we talked about my background and how I got here and how Simpalo started and all of this other stuff. And I realized, and PowerHouse, right? We talked about PowerHouse. I gave no credit to Zach, right? For PowerHouse, because he is the entertainment of this show. I'm a pretty boring dude. Like, I'm not that emotional. I don't have a ton of emotion in my voice. I really thought you were about to add to that. And
No, I would never.
And so he definitely like brings that entertainment side and brings a different perspective than what I have and experience and all of that. And so like I wouldn't be sitting here doing this still if it were not for him being a part of it. And Ilaria, I mean, she's the one that can take all this stuff and make it actually work. We had an issue with our podcast side of this was super quiet. And I mean, she spent like a few days working on this, trying to figure out how to make it better, and then figured out the solution and went back through every episode, right? You've been through, yeah.
I finished season 2 and I started season 1, so we're gonna be done probably by the end of the week.
Okay, so you are actively going back through every episode and fixing the problem that we had with it and re-uploading it and all of that stuff. And so, I mean, there's other people that are putting in the work here, right? Our fence company, I don't run the whole thing, right? I couldn't do it. There's people in here that are better at stuff than me. There's people in here that are smarter than me. And like, that's how this thing happens. That's how any of it happens. So I realized I didn't give out a lot of credit, and I just wanted to try to make up for that. And so I apologize to everyone who I did not give credit to, and it's all due to them that we are where we are. So anyways, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us. If feel free to reach out anytime. I think we're pretty much everywhere. We have, I don't know, multiple social media accounts on different platforms.
Yes, we do.
I mean, we have a business number you can call. So just reach out anytime.